My brother James was sitting across the table, looking at me with that familiar greedy glint in his eyes. "Come on, Emily, just hold that pen for a moment," he said with a fake smile. "James, no. I've told you 1,000 times this isn't a game," I replied, but he kept insisting. "Just something small. Nobody will notice. Look, our old computer broke down. We need money to buy Mom and Dad a new one." He started pleading doubt, so why was I having this argument with my brother? Because I could turn everything I touched into gold. Yes, you heard right. Whenever my hand touched something, objects would turn into pure gold. I discovered this ability when I was 8 years old. That day I was playing in the park. I fell and my hand touched the grass. A few seconds later, I noticed that those blades of grass had turned to gold. Of course, I was very excited at first. I felt like a cartoon character with superpowers. When I ran home to show Mom and Dad, they were both shocked. Dad said, "How is this even possible?" While Mom said anxiously, "Nobody must find out about this. Our daughter would be in danger." They were right too. In the first years, I had to be very careful. I was practically living in gloves. I couldn't play with my friends. I was afraid to touch anyone because it wasn't just inanimate objects. When I touched living things, I turned them to gold too. Mom and Dad were my biggest supporters in this matter. They said I needed to keep this secret, but at the same time try to live a normal life. But my brother James always had crazy plans in his head. When I started my final year of secondary school, he became very insistent about this matter. "Emily, look, we need money for university. If you just touch the corner of that table, it becomes a table with a golden corner. We can sell it." He kept repeating, "James, are you mental? If someone asks where this golden table came from, what are we going to say?" I'd reply, but he wouldn't give up. In fact, one day when I came home from school, I found several cheap accessories in my room. He left a note saying, "Touch these. We'll sell them online. Nobody will know." That's when he'd really crossed the line. I told Mom and Dad about the situation. Of course, they were very angry and had a long talk with James. At school, my closest friend was Charlotte. I was always unsure about whether to tell her my secret or not. Charlotte was very trustworthy, but I was still scared. One day something terrible happened at school. During break, Charlotte and I were sitting in the garden when I leaned against a metal bench. Absent-mindedly, I took off my glove and my hand touched the edge of the bench. A few seconds later, that part of the bench started turning golden. Charlotte couldn't believe her eyes. "Emily, how did this happen? What did you do to this bench?" she asked in amazement. That was the moment of truth. I couldn't hide my secret anymore. I told Charlotte everything. At first, she didn't believe me, but when I showed her my hand again, tears started coming from her eyes. "You're a real superhero. But you're living in a very dangerous situation," she said, hugging me tightly. Charlotte's reaction really relieved me. But my problems weren't over because the golden bench at school had been noticed. The deputy head had started an investigation asking everyone who had touched that bench. Charlotte protected me. I saw some older boys come and mess about with the bench. "They probably did something with paint," she said. Of course they believed her because Charlotte was a very trusted student at school. But when I got home, I was met with a terrible surprise. James was sitting with one of his friends and they both got excited when they saw me. "Emily, I told my mate George about your special ability. He's very curious too. Could you show him just once?" said James. I was absolutely livid. "James, have you lost your mind? You weren't supposed to tell anyone about this." I shouted, "Calm down. George is trustworthy. Besides, his dad owns a jewelry shop. He can help us," he continued. That's when I realized my brother had completely lost control. I immediately called Mom and explained the situation. Mom and Dad came home urgently. We had a big family meeting at home. What James had done was a serious breach of trust. Dad spoke very sternly. This is something only our family should know. About you put your sister in danger. The situation was explained to James's friend George, and he also promised to keep the secret. But our trust had been shaken. Afterwards, we had long family discussions. James said he was truly sorry and promised he would never do such a thing again. Charlotte proved she was worth her weight in gold and a friend. She didn't share my secret with anyone and even gave me suggestions on how I could live with my ability. Maybe in the future, you could use this ability to help scientists or to help people who are really in difficult situations, she had said. I'm now in my first year of university. I still use my ability very carefully. James has really changed and doesn't pressure me anymore. In fact, he tries to protect me now. Charlotte and I are still best friends, and she's my biggest confidant. Sometimes I make small gifts for her very carefully. Of course, my ability is still part of my life, but I'm no longer afraid of it. I'm trying to live in peace with it. Who knows, maybe one day I can really use it for a good purpose. By the way, if you have strange abilities like this too, you can share them in the comments. See you in the next video. Take care of yourself.